is the Rosetta Stone. It was the key to understanding Egyptian hieroglyphics, and it is one of the most precious and valuable treasures of the British Museum.
More than 2 centuries, the Rosetta Stone has been regarded as the unlocker of ancient Egypt. It was believed that all the details had been revealed before, that all the inscriptions had been analyzed, and its secrets had been depleted ages ago. But when state-of-the-art AI looked beyond its surface, deeper than what human eyes could ever pursue, something horrible turned out to be true. What was uncovered was not a revision of history, but a discovery with a darker significance. The surface of the stone suddenly had a story to tell that challenged everything they thought they knew. For over 3 centuries, the Rosetta Stone was assumed to be an unsolved mystery no more, an artifact already listed, deciphered, and consigned neatly into the pages of history. But its surface continued to whisper, its shadows to cling to secrets that lay unobserved. And now modern science had pulled back the silence, and what was revealed compelled scholars to face disturbing questions regarding power, language, and the vulnerability of history itself. The Rosetta Stone has always been one of history's most significant discoveries, but its appearance and history tell particulars that few expect. When initially catalogued after being unearthed in the Egyptian town of Rosetta and subsequently passed over to British soldiers in 1801, it was said only to be a black stone with 3 inscriptions. This would cause a lengthy misconception concerning its actual nature. When the stone arrived in London, individuals wished for the old writing on it to be made more legible, so they rubbed white chalk into the inscribed letters in order to make them stand out against the dark background. Subsequently, in a bid to help preserve the stone from being continually handled, it was covered with carnauba wax. The coating tended to darken its color so that it appeared to be polished black basalt. For centuries, even up to the 20th century, academics parroted this false account. The surface of the stone itself had been changed, its real material hidden beneath human action, and in this respect, even Egyptology's greatest artifact had been misinterpreted for centuries. It wasn't until 1999, when the stone was professionally cleaned, that it again showed itself as it had originally hewn. Chalk and wax layers were stripped away, and the world saw the stone for the first time since it was discovered as it must have appeared when it was cut more than 2,000 years ago. It was not that black basalt but dark gray granodiorite, sprinkled with crystals that sparkled with light. A pale pink vein, slanting diagonally across the top left, distinguished it with an almost scar-like mark, a natural flaw that imbued the block with a lifelike quality, as if it held the history of its own manufacture deep in the quarries of Aswan. This feature, overlooked for centuries, now asserted its rightful provenance. Geologists had compared it with fragments of the quarries at Gebel Tingar, on the Nile's west bank, and the similarity was unmistakable. The Rosetta Stone was a youngling of Aswan's granodiorite, cut out of the same earth that brought forth millions of other monuments of pharaonic Egypt. The stone itself is weighty, dominating, and much heavier than most people would ever envision. It measures 3 feet 8 inches tall, just more than 2 feet wide, and almost a foot thick, weighing a staggering 760 kilograms, almost 1,680 pounds. To visualize this stone being pulled from the banks of the Nile, transported through Egypt, constructed into the ramparts of a fort near Rosetta, and ultimately transported across oceans to Britain is to catch sight of the burden of history in tangible form. But what made it so important was not how large it was, but the 3 inscriptions cut on its surface. These inscriptions maintain the same decree in 3 languages, the ancient temple ritual hieroglyphs, the demotic script of everyday Egyptian life, and the Ptolemaic Greek of the ruling dynasty. By accident, this trilingual decree turned out to be the very key to deciphering the lost language of the pharaohs. The stone we have now is only a remnant of what was originally a larger and more ornate monument. The top has disappeared, and with it most of the hieroglyphic text. Only 14 incomplete lines are left, damaged on either side, a broken text which once recounted its tale in all ceremonial splendor. The demotic part, centered, has fared better, with 32 lines remaining, albeit the first 14 on the right are broken. The Greek, cut at the bottom, is the longest, 54 lines, although the lower right corner of the stone has been broken off, leaving the last part in fragments. By comparing it to other similar stelae, such as the Decree of Canopus dating to 238 BC, scholars approximate the original stone stood more than a foot taller and bore decoration at the top, winged solar disk over a scene depicting the king offering up presents to the gods. The surviving fragment was not simply text, but the remains of a tightly constructed piece of royal propaganda, intended to speak across languages and peoples. The decree itself was a remarkable expression of politics, religion, and survival. Released in 196 BC, it was the 9th year of Ptolemy V's reign, a reign that had started in blood and chaos. Ptolemy was just a child when his father and mother, Ptolemy IV and Arsinoe, were assassinated in a plot orchestrated by the king's mistress, Agathoclea. For years afterwards, Egypt was governed in his name by regents and usurpers. The nation was ravaged by insurrection, while foreign foes closed in. Antiochus III of the Seleucid Empire and Philip V of Macedon sought to carve up Egypt's territories, striking at its possessions abroad. Within Egypt itself, rebels led by Horwenifer and later Enkwenifer seized control of the south, holding their ground against Ptolemaic forces. In this chaos, the coronation of the boy king became a desperate assertion of legitimacy. At Memphis, kingship's traditional seat, priests assembled to declare him pharaoh, and shortly afterwards, the Memphis decree was inscribed in stone to be erected in temples throughout the country. The decree lauded Ptolemy's beneficence, his donations of grain and silver to the temples, his safeguarding of crops against the Nile's floodwaters, and his fidelity to the gods. It commanded his birthday and coronation day to be annually celebrated, statues of him to be erected in sanctuaries, and priests to serve in his name. In exchange, the priests pledged their allegiance to him, committing themselves to the precarious reign of a child king whose throne hung between rebellion and invasion. Key to this was that the decree was to be inscribed in hieroglyphs for the gods, in Demotic for the people, and in Greek for the rulers. This trilingual instruction was not merely an administrative convenience, it was an effort to keep together a fractured society, each group spoken to in its own language, each reminded of its position in the hierarchy. And by chance, this political move was the gift that centuries hence would unlock the voice of Egypt itself. But the road from temple decree to world icon for the Rosetta Stone was not an easy one. Its rediscovery was not in a temple, but amidst the debris of Fort Julian, near Rosetta, when French troops under Napoleon were reinforcing its walls in 1799. Lieutenant Pierre-François Bouchard noticed the inscribed slab among the wrecked buildings and immediately identified its significance. It was dispatched to Cairo, reported to Napoleon's scientific commission, and copied using printing methods so that European scholars could study it. But the war currents swept it off. When the French were captured by the British and Ottomans in 1801, the Rosetta Stone was captured as a booty of war. Colonel Tompkins Hillgrove Turner brought it to Britain, where it was delivered in 1802 and deposited in the British Museum, where it still sits. The course of the stone was determined not by scholars but by soldiers, a reminder that even the treasures of learning travel in the beneficence of power. Hieroglyphs had been an unsolved enigma for centuries. Ancient authors from the Greeks through Roman writers of the later empire had made wild guesses as to their meaning, assigning them symbolic or mystical status, but no one knew the language. From the 4th century AD, when temple culture perished and Christianity covered all of Egypt, the skill of reading hieroglyphs was lost. There were only strange images cut into stone, their voices stilled. They were miscopied for over 1,000 years. Men like Athanasius Kircher in the 17th century wrote books full of fanciful translations, but nothing moved forward. It was the Rosetta Stone that saved the day. With its parallel texts, one of which Greek, a language already familiar, scholars at last had an opportunity to connect the unknown with the familiar. Slow early attempts were made. The Greek was translated first, but even that held official terminology that was unknown. Then focus moved to the Demotic, a writing system that Swedish diplomat Johann David Akerblad and French scholar Sylvestre de Sacy worked on, succeeding in recognizing a few proper names. These initial sparks were followed by larger breakthroughs. Thomas Young in England, following the advice to examine the royal names within cartouches, recognized the name Ptolemaeos in hieroglyphs and noted that hieroglyphs and Demotic had phonetic signs. But the final leap was made by Jean-François Champollion. In 1822, contrasting the names Ptolemy and Cleopatra, he calculated an alphabet of phonetic hieroglyphs and then set it out in Egyptian names such as Ramesses and Thutmose. For more than 1,000 years, the pharaoh's language could now be read once again. The Rosetta Stone had not merely presented a hint, it had given the vital link. The job did not stop there. For centuries, scholars honed in on translations, argued over which Greek, hieroglyphic, or demotic version was the original, and wrestled over discrepancies between them. Each had been penned with priorities a shade different, sometimes sliding into phrasing closer to ordinary language, sometimes edging toward religious formality. This imbalance indicated that the decree was not merely copied verbatim, but composed in styles attentive to the audiences that heard it. The stone was not an ideal dictionary but a multifaceted message, political in its provenance, religious in temper, and intensely pragmatic in intent. To contemporary scholars, it was no longer merely a decipherment tool, it was a study of the exercise of power through language. Still, despite everything that has been revealed, the Rosetta Stone remains to trouble us with unanswerable questions. Its incomplete upper section still leaves blanks in the hieroglyphic script. Its history from Egypt to Britain is still disputed, with today's Egypt frequently calling for its repatriation. And now, with AI probing its surface at microscopic magnifications, subtle marks not visible to the naked eye have started to uncover fresh layers, tool marks, possibly deliberate scratches, and even residue of pigment that might have originally painted the inscriptions. These findings imply that all we can glimpse now is merely a shadow of what used to exist. And even more disturbing, the scans with the AI have hinted at anomalies in the damaged portions of the stone that don't follow natural patterns of erosion. Some historians mutter of purposeful erasures, of letters once cut out to conceal what they said. What was cut out? Why concealed? Was it political opposition, heretic thinking, or something worse? For the moment, we do not know. But the Rosetta Stone, which had remained silent for centuries before suddenly speaking again in the hands of scholars, now speaks once again in machine language. Its face, read far beyond the limits of human eyes, still has stories to tell. Some simply confirm us in what we already know, verifying facts long guessed at. Others disturb us, indicating that even our most triumphant epiphanies can be based on foundations that have been manipulated, altered, or hidden. The Rosetta Stone, therefore, is more than simply the key to unlocking the past. It is also a reminder that history itself is tenuous, its verities subject to the chiseling hands that shaped them and the interpreting eyes that read them. And maybe the biggest enigma is not what the stone told us, but what is still hidden inside it, patiently waiting for us to peer deeper.